Hi, Dr. Regan Robertson, CCO of Productive Dentist Academy here, and I have a question for you. Are you finding it hard to get your team aligned to your vision, but you know you deserve growth just like everybody else? That's why we've created the PDA Productivity Workshop. For nearly 20 years, PDA workshops have helped dentists just like you align their teams, get control of scheduling, and create productive practices that they love walking into every day. Just imagine how you will feel when you know your schedule is productive, your systems are humming, and your team is aligned to your vision. It's simple, but it's not necessarily easy. We can help. Visit productivedentist.com/workshop. That's productivedentist.com/workshop to secure your seats now. Instead of succumbing to obstacles with inaction, we need a method and a framework for understanding, appreciating, and acting upon the obstacles life throws at us. And as humans, we want to approach obstacles with our best intent forward. We want to act, deftly, smoothly, like we are just experienced. But obstacles are just that. That's a challenge. It's a puzzle to overcome.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in.
Hey everybody, it's Chad Johnson here with my co-host Regan Robertson. Regan, how are you?
I'm feeling productive today, Chad.
I love that you skipped over the fact that you don't feel the best. Listeners know that she chose optimism there. Well done. So today on our podcast, Everyday Practices Dental Podcast, today we are talking about The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, a book within the last few years. And if you listen to it on Audible, Ryan Holiday reads it himself and also has, I would call it a postscript podcast style interview at the end of the book. And he's just seemingly just a really down to earth guy that, and you would expect that from this kind of book. So Regan, start us off kind of explaining, in your opinion, having just read it, what The Obstacle is the Way is about.
Well, I think it's a great condensed version of, you could take 20 or 30 individual business books, say, for example. So if you've read anything on business, any sort of self-help book or improve your business book, they will have one sort of controlling idea about the book. The Obstacle is the Way takes the lesson, like books A, B, and C. Each one may have a lesson A, a lesson B, and a lesson C. You will find a condensed version, I think, in this book, all of them in this one particular book about how to lead yourself.
Yeah, mindset is what it's about, controlling your response to. And it goes along the lines of, what was that last class that you were doing last week that you were really excited about? That was,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. How would these relate?
Positive Intelligence is the book that the coaching is based off by Shazard. I'm going to butcher this. Shazard Shamin. I can't remember. I need to do that in our editing. But Positive Intelligence is the book. Shazard is the creator of it. And he teaches you how to raise your positive quotient. I love that you went there, because if you look at the chapters of The Obstacle is the Way, and a way to describe this is a boulder drops in your path. So Ryan explains this in the book, Chad. We are on the path and a boulder goes in the way. Now we have an obstacle. The obstacle becomes the path. And that was one of those few sentences that made me go, whoa.
The parable was that a king put this obstacle in the way to see who would figure out, or, what people would do. And finally, this one guy, rather than complaining, figures out, well, why don't we just move this out of the way? And then he finds a treasure underneath with a note that says, the obstacle is the way. And so that was, definitely a cool parable.
Totally. So, So in this, in that philosophy of kind of like reframing your mind, It's you've probably heard us on our podcast before say it's easy, but it's not simple, or it's simple, but it's not easy. So there's a chapter about practicing objectivity. And if you've ever given a friend advice, like, oh, Chad, it would just be easier if you just got up at 4:30 instead of 5 and just went ahead and learned your extra, I don't know, got your extra swim laps in or something like that. It's easy for me to say that, but I'm not in your shoes. I'm not feeling how you're feeling in that moment. And I think that this book paired with positive intelligence is important, because you almost have to have a really healthy sense of self before you're going to put all of the practices in the obstacle as the way into practice. And that's why I was saying a little bit earlier that experience, failure, time, you can't cheat those things. You can probably speed up your failures, and you can also speed up how fast maybe you learn from those failures and your mindset around that. But you almost have to get up to the point you're at today. Everything is leading to a point to be able to understand that. And the reason I say that is I've been reading Marcus Aurelius for a very long time. And I've read books like this for the past 20 plus years. But when I read this one, it almost spread like melted butter. It was really easy. And I thought that's because I've done a lot of the work in order to get me to the place I am now, where I can see how I am applying some of these philosophies already. And then where, oh, I need to lean into this a little bit more, or I can look at this from a different perspective. And I think Ryan does a great job in telling these stories through current figures like professional athletes and very famous figures that we can relate to, like Abraham Lincoln dealing with constant depression and how he still managed to leverage that obstacle in order to be successful. And that was one of my other sort of inner critics. So in the positive intelligence book, it says you've got these inner saboteurs that are attacking you all the time. And one of them is an inner judge. They will judge you. They will judge others. We all judge people. Let's be honest. We all do it to an extent, even though we shouldn't. Well, right, Chad?
No, I would say there are times when it's good to judge, which is totally contrarian. But like my boss growing up working at the water park always said, listen, there are some kids that you can tell are weak swimmers. Discriminate against them. Watch them wholeheartedly. You don't have to watch the mom that's in the shallow end standing up as much as you do their kid, and they wouldn't have any problem. Now, saying it out loud sounds horrible, but he's like, it's the truth. You need to know who, like if you said, well, I'm going to spend the same amount of time of my eyeballs on everyone, it's just like, that's not right. And can we get it wrong? Sure. But like, it's not necessarily wrong to go, that guy looks lost. I should ask if he needs help. And you go up and you say, do you need help? And if he says, no, why? Why would you say that? You know, sometimes you might not hit it out of the park, but other times it's like, no, you just had, let's call it an intuition. Let's call it something or another that led you to the proper discriminatory right answer. And that is way wrong to say in America, because we don't want to discriminate wrongly. And I understand that. But when another word for discrimination would be discernment. If I said, do you want discernment? And oh yeah,
of course. Okay,
so you want to decide between right and wrong, and between, you know, who the weak swimmer is and who the not weak swimmer is, and stuff like that. And sometimes we get it wrong, but you know what? Like, that's okay. And again, I apologize to anyone that really hurts their feelings that I'm saying that, but I don't see any problem with rightful discrimination / discernment. It sounds bad. What's your thoughts on that, Regan?
Well, my point to it was that was a good explanation of you know, your viewpoint on judgment. My point to it was, I love it very much when my inner judge is proven wrong.
Of course.
So I'm delighted when it is. And my inner cynic or my inner judge, as we jumped into this book, as I first was reading through the first few chapters there, was, you know, there is a fine line, just like in the positive intelligence book, with, I would call it toxic positivity. So there is a point where if you are too optimistic, yes, I think you can cross over into avoidance. And this is absolutely not that type of book. But my inner judge was, you know, the point of this whole book is any obstacle can become an opportunity and gift in your life.
Yes.
Anyone. My brain immediately goes to like a child dying or some horrific accident occurs. And so I was having this sort of run in the back of my head as I was listening to the chapters and reading them. And I thought to myself, when's this going to come up? When is it unfair? When is an obstacle come up that you really, there is no positive sight to it? And Ryan dives into this instead. And I thought that was really fascinating that there are, I think he used, who is that actor, Superman, Christopher Reeves?
Yes.
He used him and Michael J. Fox as examples of,
and that it was out of their control.
That it was out of their control, which gets back to the Serenity Prayer. Yeah, it was out of their control. So what are they going to do with that knowledge and with that circumstance and with that situation that happened to them in their life? And so I was very excited to have the judge shattered. And once that little occurrence happened, I was very open to, hearing what the rest of this book had to say. And it was just, there were so many pieces of it that I think blew my mind. When did you read this book originally? And what have you felt like in rereading it and re-reviewing it? What stuck out to you this time around?
Yeah, just for this podcast, I went through it again the last couple of weeks. Previously, it was after COVID hit, and it was a good mindset book because I think we have to recalibrate ourselves to Stoicism because we want to deviate from it, but there's a lot of wisdom to it. And I don't know differentiating, the times that I went through it, but this time going through it, it reaffirmed. I feel like everyone should occasionally recalibrate because you might not be ready for a certain lesson with a certain maturity level or what you're going through at a certain time, but you might be, able to take a bite or two, but you have to keep on going back to it. So like you said, Marcus Aurelius, like reading his stuff, or did you notice too, when he was talking about Seneca and he said, listen, there's 3 lessons to Seneca. Imagine that you're advising yourself as a friend to keep an objective perspective. Number 2, large obstacles also have large weaknesses. So whatever the biggest strength to something is, in fact, I brought this up yesterday at our girls' soccer game. I said, listen, the wind is over 20 miles per hour. Those girls are also playing against 20 mile per hour winds. So we have to get in the mindset, like it's cold out here. I mean, it was a cold, windy day and everything like that. And I said, let's let them get down more in their heads over this than what we're going to let it. So be doing jumping jacks, get warm. We need to stay warm and let that affect them more negatively. We're going to kick with the wind and defend against the wind. And then, just by chance, when we get the ball, we're going to, again, kick with the wind. And when we're against the wind, we're going to have low kicks to our targets, be direct. And so, I tried using the mentality. It's just like when we're going into this fight, which is what games are, right? They're mini wars and battles. That's what they've become, is little, games, practice sessions of mentality, and will mentality win? So just yesterday, again, I was using this. So we were talking large obstacles, large weaknesses. That's number 2. And number 3 of the great lessons of Seneca is that you should use your will to accept what you can't change and then change the things that you can. And so, when bad things happen, like COVID, to go, okay, well, listen, I can't change the fact that COVID is happening, but I can change the fact that blank. And, being more resolute about saying, well, this is what I can change. And therefore, that's what I'm going to focus on. And the other stuff I can't, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And in that story, that's a really good example right there, because the things that you could control is, so Marcus Aurelius, also one of the quotes I think that was pulled out is, life is dyed by the color of your thoughts. And that's what I was trying to say about before you even start to read this book, you have to have a certain mindset in place. And you were teaching your team, you can control your thoughts, right? You can
Correct.
steady your own nerves in that, which is a section of it.
And we were even acknowledging, I was like, yes, of course it's cold. Yes, of course it's windy. And yeah, you don't like it. But guess what? The other team doesn't like it too. So knowing this, let's let them suffer more over it and let's just get over it.
Chad, you know what it is? Oh, one of the stories in the book was about, I think it was a ninja fighter. So excuse me if it's not a ninja fighter, but it was something about martial arts. And it was saying instead of the natural defense is to push against.
Correct.
And in this one, you pull.
You pull.
And I had the best visual of Ronda Rousey when she first hit MMA, because I was big into the UFC fights. And I remember she just came out and took every woman off her stance almost immediately. And it was that same mentality almost of a pull.
Yes.
Like, I am not going to defend. I am here to that whole mindset flip completely took the enemy off guard.
So watch this. It's really cool. They talk about the Benjamin Franklin effect. And so he was trying to figure out how to work with one of the other senators or congressmen. And he thought, he thought for a while, what should I do in order to get the results that I need, to be able to get his vote? So he went and he asked the other congressman, he said, he knew that he really liked books and he had a cherished prized book. And he said, can I borrow that book? And when he borrowed that book, then he just put it on his shelf for a couple of weeks. He didn't even care about the book. But then what it left is that other guy to think about, well, why did he want that book? Why would he want me why did he ask me for this book? Maybe he likes me. Maybe he knew that I would offer. And so the cognitive dissonance that went into effect was, why would this enemy of mine, want to borrow this book if he thinks I'm that bad of a guy? And why would I actually loan it to him if I think he's that bad of a guy? And he ended up then, being able to foster a relationship with this guy. And because he basically was getting the other guy to loan him stuff. He wasn't asking them for, it's not from loaning them something, but asking them to loan you something.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty cool that it's along the same lines of, instead of pushing, like, hey, I'm going to loan you this book. I don't want your book. I never liked you. Hey, can you do me a favor? Can I borrow that book? And that got the person thinking, and it was a pull. It was a pull move.
It totally
was. This goes back to like yin yang stuff, Yeah.
I think this book is designed to help us take action too. I noticed one of the quotes that I heard from Ryan was, instead of succumbing to obstacles with inaction, we need a method and a framework for understanding, appreciating, and acting upon the obstacles life throws at us. And as humans, we want to approach obstacles with our best intent forward. We want to act, deftly, smoothly, like we are just experienced. But obstacles are just that. That's a challenge. It's a puzzle to overcome. And each little framework exists within, I think, the chapters outlined in it. And living in the present moment, altering your perspective, recognizing your power. Each of these are like little bite-sized chunks of what the Stoics point to as how you should live your life.
Well, even within dentistry, perfectionism is quite a thing. But he's just like, one of the things he said was, think progress, not perfection. So they go into that. And, that was one of the thoughts. And I was like, boy, that's big in dentistry. Is like, we almost cherish the perfectionism. And it's just like, no, progress. And another good point that I read was, that success is tied to how we view failure. And a lot of this was liberation, that because like, instead of worrying about everything, you're only worrying about what you can control. Go ahead.
Well, what about SpaceX just last week or 2 weeks ago? Their
Perfect
rocket,
point.
right? Exploded,
Perfect
didn't
point.
work. Yeah. And they were touting it as a success. Now, it was hotly debated, I noticed, in the scientific community on what equated to a success or not. But when you said that, it's largely how you look at failure. They definitely are a key entity that looks at what they were trying to succeed at as scientists, what they wanted to have happen. Was it perfect? No. But what did they learn from that so that they can modify and go different? And I think a lot of times for myself, even, I tend to want things to run so smoothly. I want things to go off without a hitch. And we forget that there is in the obstacle a lot of where that growth happens, as cliche as it sounds. So yeah, how do you handle failure? I think for me, it's changed. It's definitely changed over the years.
Well, it's cool, the Thomas Edison story, and he talks about how when he was 67 years old, that his whole laboratory burned down, all of his prototypes, experiments, research notes, everything. And he was pretty excited because he said, well, I've gotten rid of all the old rubbish. And what he invited his family out to see the explosion.
Yes.
And that almost is the over optimism, like that you were talking about. It's like, how do you celebrate your loss? It's like when you heard those people cheering for Elon Musk's SpaceX thing blowing up, you know, they're like, yes. And it's like, yes, what? But this guy was almost doing the same thing. But you know why? Because he wasn't left with, oh, what are you going to do? Cry about it? Like, what's that going to help? I mean, increase your oxytocin, sure. But like this guy was like, yes. And then he brings a family out and they're like, why are you so celebrating? He's like, you'll never see such a cool demonstration of explosion. This is awesome. And I've not failed. I have not failed. I've found 10,000 ways that won't work.
So I was going to say, what built up to that present moment was him going through, the book explains to readers that Edison went through 6,000 different filaments.
Yes.
When trying to create the light bulb? Yep. 6,000 filaments. That's a lot. That's, right. I mean, can you even find 6,000 of anything? Yeah. Let alone, I think beard hair was one of the, it was really crazy. And so that forges you into a person that can look to something like a factory fire and go at it with such fervor that you can say, hey, go round up all of my family and friends. Let's go look at this gigantic fire.
Right. Right at the beginning of the book, there's a quote at the beginning of the first chapter, and it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. And I actually looked this up on Google so I could read it, but it looks like you can buy little posters or what art of this, for around your house. Genius is the ability to put into effect what is on your mind. And there's something empowering about that. Like basically this book was not a killjoy of stoicism, but it was an empowering stoicism book. And I really liked it.
Me too. What's the one area where you feel like you might have to lean into and work more at?
Communication and positive affirmation for people.
Really? That surprises me for you. Positive affirmation for others or for yourself?
Here's why. It's almost stoicism because I just go, well, of course you're doing a good job. I'd tell you if you weren't, and so it's kind of funny because, and when Joanne hears this, my coach from Productive Dentist Academy, she'll laugh because she knows it's true. But yeah, it's always, I think it's, if I'm intentional, I can have good positive affirmation, but it's not my MO. I just kind of assume that. Oh,
sure.
That I'm just like, if someone's like, well, they need positive affirmation. I'm like, I guess, they're like, don't you like a positive affirmation? I'm like, I suppose, but shouldn't you just do the good job just because you should do the good job? And it almost goes along the line of stoicism where it's just like, I guess I'm just controlling, I don't want to manipulate people and this and that. It's weird. I don't know what to make of. I'm not making a defense of it or anything like that, but I think that gets in my way.
I like that. I think that's a good one to work through. For me, the control your emotions was the one area that I circled and highlight and everything, because whenever any situation comes up, I know I'm a feeling person on the Myers-Briggs. So I know I'm going to feel it. I'm going to feel it somewhere in my body. And especially when you have, a snap minute to make a decision, I would love to be like that samurai warrior. All I picture is like that sword so smoothly sailing. I would love to be able to wield my emotions and control them in a way that the Stoics seem to be able to do, that they demonstrated. And I think that's my biggest puzzle piece that I'm currently working on is how to give it that space, because that's what you have to do. You have to almost give it space. And we had something happen this weekend at home. I won't put it on the podcast, but I would say we had something happen this weekend at home, and it was an accident. It was nobody's fault. I mean, it just happened in the moment. And I reacted as how I knew, and it was good. I didn't explode. I didn't go straight into emotions, but I kind of I could feel myself trying to kind of separate and then walk everybody through the process. Yeah. And that at the end of it, it still wasn't it was not a great accident. It was not a super exciting outcome. It kind of tanked my feelings for the day, but I felt like, I'm going to honor this moment because I've been reading this book. I've been going through positive intelligence. I think it's working, even in a little tiny baby step, because it won't be perfect. Right. But these two books, the Serenity Prayer, really helps us understand that as business owners, as parents, as spouses, as community leaders, whoever we are, we're going to have things in our control and out of our control. And those obstacles are going to come no matter your circumstance in life. And that was something that Shirzad had said. Even if you had a perfect childhood, your parents were perfect, your community was perfect, you will still develop self-saboteurs. You can't get away from it, just like you can't get away from obstacles. So why not learn from the Stoics in this nice condensed version? We're not dealing with the these and the thous. It's spoken really well. So kudos, Ryan Holiday. Great book and great recommendation, Chad.
Hope you all enjoyed the podcast discussing the book, and be a Stoic or don't.
Thank you, Chad. We'll see you guys soon.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share, or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.